1964年、低予算の西部劇「荒野の用心棒」で新しいアメリカンヒーローが誕生しました。この映画の監督は新人のボブ・ロバートソンと発表されていました。しかしそれは実はイタリア人監督セルジオ・レオーネの変名だったのです。セルジオ・レオーネの残した主な作品は2つの3部作だけです。しかし彼が映画界で果たした役割は非常に大きなものでした。
For film geeks, of all the great directors that they can love and talk on and on, Leone is the one that your dad and your mom might also like too.
Leone had a fantastic eye for casting. I mean, there were people who'd been under Hollywood's nose for years, and they hadn't taken advantage of them.
It was like serious play, and that's one of the things, one of his charms, that he played with it. He allowed things to happen.
Sergio Leone was an animal of movies. He knew his power.
Once he was rolling, he wanted to keep going. It was working like a storyteller. You can't tell a storyteller to stop in the middle.
100 years from now, Leone will be one of the great, you'll be unequivocally up there with the greatest of them all.
セルジオ・レオーネは1929年サイレント映画の監督の子としてローマに生まれました。家は豊かでしたが、父親がムッソリーニ政権の引き立てを失ってからその生活は苦しくなり、彼は少年時代をローマ中心部の込み入った路地の中で過ごしました。ファシズムによる圧政の中、レオーネ少年はハリウッドの西部劇に代表されるアメリカンドリームに深い憧れを抱くようになります。
His provenance as a child of Mussolini's Italy is something that has been neglected. I mean, there's lots of references in the movies to Leone growing up. There's in Fistful of Dynamite in particular, that scene where Rod Steiger's family is wiped out in the cave. This relates to a very famous incident in the Second World War called the Ardeatine Ditches, the Fosse Ardeatine, where a whole lot of Roman civilians were massacred by the SS in a cave, and the cave was sealed up. It's still a memorial, like a Holocaust museum in Rome. Everyone in Rome seeing that would have known what that referred to. That's a reference to the Second World War.
しかし戦争が終わり、初めて本物のアメリカ人を見た時のレオーネの心は冷ややかでした。彼が出会ったアメリカ軍の GI はスクリーンの中の理想的な英雄からはかけ離れていたのです。このシニカルな見方が彼の作品の根底にずっと流れ続けることになりました。1945年から59年までにレオーネは50本以上の映画の助監督を務めました。ビットリオ・デシーカ、マリオ・ボナールといった巨匠の作品もありました。将来妻となる女性と出会ったのもこの頃でした。
Ci sposassimo, lui mi diceva: ma tu pensi che diventerò un regista, che ce la farò? E io gli dicevo: tu vai avanti per la tua strada, non ti lasciare imbrigliare per cose che ti convengono, tu devi essere determinato, io sono sicura che ce la fai. Infatti lui se l'è sempre ricordata questa cosa.
1950年代後半、アメリカの映画制作者たちは古代ギリシャやローマを舞台にした作品を撮るためにイタリアへやってきました。レオーネは急病で降板したマリオ・ボナール監督の後を継いで、ポンペイ最後の日で初めて監督を務めました。その後続いてロード島の要塞を撮影しました。
It's almost unique. I mean, he makes his own movie. It's quite successful, a sword and sandal thing about the Colossus of Rhodes shot in Spain. And then he retreats to becoming an assistant again on Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, here's someone who's frightened of putting his head above the parapet.
When he started his career, he made those sandals movies, but he was working inside, waiting for the moment.
1960年代に入ると歴史ものの映画の興行成績は次第に上がらなくなりました。アメリカからの投資が枯渇し、イタリアの映画産業は危機に直面します。一方、アメリカの西部劇は昔から根強い人気を保っていました。イタリアのプロデューサーたちはこの市場を獲得しようと乗り出しました。地元で安い制作費で西部劇を撮ろうと考えたのです。撮影はスペインの南部。アメリカの B 級映画の俳優を主役に据え、イタリア人スタッフはアメリカ風の変名を使ってまるで本物のアメリカ映画のように見せかけました。レオーネが撮り始めた頃にはすでに25本ものこのようないわゆるマカロニウエスタンと呼ばれる映画が制作されていました。
Quando lui aveva la sua sceneggiatura per un pugno di dollari, praticamente tutte le mattine si svegliava con il suo bel fascicolo sotto il braccio e faceva il giro delle produzioni. La mattina partiva come un grande eroe, la sera tornava come un poveraccio, però la mattina ripartiva sempre come un eroe, non è che perdesse.
粘り強い説得が功を奏し、荒野の用心棒は穴埋めのための映画として制作することを許されました。ある作品を作った際に出る損失をカバーするために同じセット、同じ衣装で撮るという条件でした。しかし結果的に荒野の用心棒は元の作品を上回ってしまいました。この作品で主役を演じたのはアメリカのテレビシリーズ「ローハイド」に出演していたクリント・イーストウッドでした。
I came here 32 or 33 years ago to meet a director who was not well known, like I was not well known as an actor, and to embark on this very small film, a remake of a Japanese samurai story on the plains of Spain for an Italian, German, Spanish co-production. And it was a very humble project, to say the least. I don't think any of us anticipated that it would make a career for us, but we all thought it was going to be great fun being a pistolero on the plains of Spain. And then all of a sudden, a year or so later, things started to happen. And if I hadn't come here on that journey with Sergio Leone and Marconi and all and Massimo Dallamano and Tonino Delacoli and all of the crew, who knows where I would have ended up in the history of things.
The American Westerns start and we go on and on and on with music and cow and ladies and Indians. And after we have to arrive at the gunshot, final gunshot. Every 3-4 minutes in my movie have to be a gunshot. So we have to create character that do that. This was his imagination. It was right.
In America, the convention was you could never show in the same shot. Someone pulls a gun, boom, and shoots them. You always had to have a cut. This was a long, long convention in Hollywood that went back to the Hays Code. You couldn't tie together the weapon and its effect. In every movie, Leone didn't know anything about that. So he just has people pulling guns, boom. And suddenly everyone, you can do that, you know. So Americans start presenting violence in that way. So he has a huge impact there.
Get 3 coffins ready.
Huh? He also created one of, the greatest screen icons in the history of cinema, Clint Eastwood. If he was going out to do his version of the John Ford movies, well, he actually is the only director to really compete with Ford when it came to creating his own icon. The way Ford created John Wayne, he created the actor to finally replace John Wayne in the histories of and the annals of cinema.
My mule. You see, he got all riled up when you went and fired those shots at his feet.
It's a new kind of hero. It's not a hero that you identify with. It's not a hero you're supposed to look up to. It's a kind of style statement. You know, he's the hero because he's fastest with a gun, because he looks the most stylish, and a hell of a design thing. I mean, a very Italian sense of design in all these costumes that they wear. And he's just cool, super cool.
I don't think it's nice, you laughing. See, my mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him. Now, if you apologize like I know you're going to, I might convince him that you really didn't mean it.
Clint hated smoking those little cigars. I think he'd get nauseous, you know. But it was established and he had to keep doing it, you know.
My mistake. 4 coffins.
荒野の用心棒はすぐに大ヒットし、イタリア製西部劇として初めてアメリカに配給されました。続いて制作した夕日のガンマンで、レオーネはもう一人のカリスマスターを作り上げました。リー・バンクリーフです。当時バンクリーフは役者を辞め、酒に溺れ、画家として不安定な生活を送っていました。
He was amazing at casting, I think, and suddenly it turned them into something that Hollywood had never imagined. You know, Lee Van Cleef had made, you know, countless films as the second baddie from the left, and nobody noticed, you know, in High Noon, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But Leone didn't forget, you know, something about that profile. Same with Eastwood. He really had a gift for, you know, how people look and how they'll come over on the screen.
Hey, mister, you just can't pull the emergency cord and jump off. Tell me, why'd you stop that train? If you want to get off, you... Well, the railroad company would be mighty pleased to make any arrangements for any passenger if you want to get off here, sir.
I did get off. Thanks.
At the opening of, for a few dollars more, the biggest theater in Rome, 2,500 people, we were scared to death. I was near him with tents, because no seats for nobody. And my hand was there, and suddenly one hand grabbed my hand. The moment when the title started, it was Sergio. And when the first start scene, the audience come crazy, it was an applause, and we win.
続夕日のガンマンに取り掛かる頃には制作費も跳ね上がっていました。イーストウッドの出演料25万ドルは荒野の用心棒の総制作費を上回っていました。
There was a degree of realism in his movies, as surrealistic as they were, that was always seemed to be missing from the Hollywood westerns of the 30s and the 40s and the 50s.
He said, I will approach the Western in another way. I will not dress them as they do in all the American Westerns. I'll go back to Matthew Brady's Prince, and I'll dig out these long dusters that the men wore in the picture and the clothes. He did wonderful things like all the military men are posing for pictures just as I'm being led to get on the train.
One of the most wildly in particularly crushing weird things in the history of cinema is after going through this incredible journey in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, where we've fallen in love with Eastwood and we've fallen in love with Wallach, and we just have to assume that they've committed some bond with each other, that they would still screw each other over at the end. You actually think that he might just hang Tuco at the end of the movie, and it's so crushing. Can't you guys feel towards each other the way we feel towards you?
You're joking, Blood. You wouldn't play a joke on me like that. It's no joke, it's a rope, Tuco.
Clint was a wonderful guide for me, particularly when they were going to blow up the bridge. He said, don't go anywhere near explosives. You never know what's going to happen.
Are you sure? Yeah, sure, I'm sure.
Most of the soldiers were Spaniards who were loaned by the Franco government to the film to play Civil War soldiers. They built the bridge, and the captain, a Spanish army captain, put the dynamite around so that it would blow up. And the man, the Italian scenic designer, said, listen, I'm so pleased with your work. I would like you to put the two wires together and blow it. So when I say, vaya, go, you do it. The Italian scenic specialist said to an assistant, vaya, meaning set that camera moving, and the captain, thinking he said vaya for him, put the two wires together. And Leone was looking up at the sky like this, looking for the clouds to go by him, and the bridge blew.
Tonino degli Colli diceva io non ho preso niente, sai, non ho preso niente perché ero fermo. E tu dici, mo che facciamo? E lui ha detto, mo facciamo pausa.
When I was in a restaurant, he asked the menu, and he said, Claudia, you should eat this, this, this. All the things he couldn't eat, he wanted me to eat. And he was looking at him like this. Fantastic, how is it? How is it?
レオーネのお気に入りだったローマのレストラン。壁に飾られた写真の中にレオーネ少年が小学校時代の友達と写っている一枚があります。それは後に作曲家として一緒に仕事をすることになるエンニオ・モリコーネでした。
I think a case can easily be made that Morricone and Leone may be the greatest composer-director collaboration in the history of film. Even as wonderful as the Hitchcock-Bernard Herrmann collaboration was, it almost isn't even comparable to how important Morricone was to Leone and Leone was to Morricone. In fact, it's almost you can't even you can't even imagine the movies without Morricone's music.
Vengo da un'esperienza prima del cinema, da un'esperienza di musica d'avanguardia, anche sperimentale. E la musica d'avanguardia sperimentale spesso ha tentato di recuperare suoni extramusicali, i suoni di animali, i suoni di campane, di frusta, di incudini e di altri suoni strani, i fischi, gli archilofoni, queste cose qua mi è venuto proprio normale e spontaneo. Viene da questa mia ricerca d'avanguardia che feci ancora prima di lavorare per il cinema. Del resto era una mia aspirazione e il cinema di Sergio ne ha usufruito.
Arrivava Ennio con tutti i pezzetti di carta piccolissimi in cui non capivamo che potesse leggere, c'erano 3 note e si metteva a suonare, canticchiava o fischiava e Sergio regolarmente veniva a sapere che c'erano delle musiche che Ennio aveva scritto per un altro film.
レオーネは次により野心的な作品作りに取り掛かりました。叙事詩的な色合いの濃いウエスタンで始まる年代記3部作でした。
He had a huge canvas on which he worked psychologically, historically, even in terms of the economic understanding of the development of America, because you know that triptych of Once Upon a Time in America, working backwards, Once Upon a Time in the Revolution, which is in this country known as Docu-Sucker, and Once Upon a Time in the West. And if you start with Once Upon a Time in the West and go all the way through, I mean, it's sort of the European Marxist view of the, founding of America at the hands of robber barons and organized crime. And it's not far from wrong, by the way, if at all. The greatest scene he ever directed was the opening sequence of Once Upon a Time in the West.
Morricone took Leone to see a performance artist at work. And this performance artist was performing symphony for a metal ladder, right? So this guy comes on the stage with a highly amplified microphone with a metal ladder and goes squeak, 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 and does this piece of music entirely with a ladder. The idea being all sounds are music. You know, it's a modern interpretation of music. And they went home and they thought, let's do that with the first scene.
It's like a haiku poem, you know, it's just flawless. I mean, it's extraordinary filmmaking.
Once Upon a Time in the West that I'd always loved had appeared on, was appearing on TV, and I watched it, and all of a sudden, now thinking in terms of a director mode, it seemed like almost like a film school, how to direct a movie. Actually, it was truly how to direct a Sergio Leone movie. But as far as like really focusing in on the director as star or the director as artist, you know, the signature, it was all there. I mean, the way Bronson would enter frame, you know, in a close-up in the left, and then something else would come in on the right, and the way the shots, it just you know, the camera would do this, and characters would enter here and leave there. You could just see it was being directed.
Il Dolly, per esempio, bellissimo Dolly di C'era una volta al West, quando la cardinale esce dalla stazione e va verso la vallata, quella io l'ho scritta prima, e lui ha girato col Dolly a tempo con la musica. La musica era in scena, ecco, quindi non mi sono ispirato io, è lui che si è ispirato, capito? E questa è la forza di Sergio, e la forza della musica e del suo cinema, perché lui cercava una vera grande collaborazione col compositore e non lasciava andare le cose come venivano, insomma. Curava molto la musica, come curava la sua immagine, come curava tutti gli altri suoni. Non soltanto la musica, lui è stato un maestro del suono, del suo cinema.
The train pulls up, people get out, she climbs out, they give her her bags, and she stands looking for somebody, the man, but he's not there because Henry Fonda killed him.
All right, shut down those feed sacks first. Come on, come on.
She walks up and down the platform where the train is, and the train is still sound effects and the vapor and all of that is still there. And horses coming out of the boxcars. Now the camera is on her, and it follows her.
This was fantastic, because usually, really, the woman is like an object. I mean, it's just the woman there. But in this film, the woman was the center of everything. The way he looked at the woman, he loved the women. And you could see that in the movie, the way he looked at me. One thing marvelous, he loved the actors. And for him, the actors were queens and kings. He was just fantastic.
Sergio was very encouraging to me. I think that his sensitivity that way towards actors is something that's kind of unusual in directors. You know, a lot of directors I think are intimidated by their actors or jealous of them or just sort of condescending towards them, you know, because most directors live in Hollywood, and Hollywood is a place where everybody wants to be an actor, and therefore they hate and envy actors because they're not. But Sergio was a real artist. I mean, he just loved anybody who made his film better, whether it was the actors or the set dresser or whoever it might be.
All of those close-ups, those intense close-ups, especially with the lead who had those wide-brim hats, and he'd start the close-up on the hat, and slowly the brim would rise into the eyes. Now, actors loved that. Fonda loved it.
This is your American Western. This is the tradition I grew up. Now watch me subvert it. And how am I going to subvert it? I'm going to cast Henry Fonda, all right, one of your favorite good guys, as the baddest guy.
ハリウッドのトップスターもレオーネの映画に出たいというようになりました。撮影に拘束される期間は長くても、細部にこだわる作り方やリラックスした取り組み方に多くのスターが共感を抱いていました。
We'd have wonderful long lunches. Charlie Bronson would say, hey, wait a minute, what is this? Why don't we get back on the set and get working? And Hank Fonda and I would say, relax, Charlie, relax. You'll never get it like this again. This is a great atmosphere here.
Tutte le persone che hanno lavorato con lui nel set mi raccontano, prima di dirmi che grande professionista, che grande regista, la prima cosa che mi dicono quante risate ci siamo fatti. In questo io li voglio dire, secondo me è proprio l'aspetto che poi di papà nelle varie interviste, nelle cose, forse non è mai uscito fuori, no? Perché aveva l'aspetto un po' burbero, lui con questo sguardo penetrante.
We had this big Chapman crane, and I don't think he'd ever had a Chapman before. And seeing him sitting on the Chapman crane going up and down, you know, and, oh, you know, he was just having, his legs were kind of dangling out in space. Having a wonderful time with this toy, you know, it was just great, you know.
Due punti di vista no, ma litigare per delle stupidaggini sì, molto. Ma come moglie e marito, dopo 5 minuti alla fine andiamo a mangiare. No, sì, beh, ma capita. Con lui che era un pignolo poi impunito, come si dice in Italia, non so tradotto come fate, non so. E insisteva in certe cose che magari molte cose delle volte era impossibile farle, insomma. Lui ci provava poi.
This man was a big baby. He was huge, but it was like a big baby. And he adored the West. But I don't think the West was grand enough for him, so he created his own West. Everything was a bit bigger, everything was a bit louder.
Duck, you sucker.
My favorite scene was not very exciting. It's when we arrive, and I stand with my back towards the audience, and there's the bank of gold we've been trying to find. And why it was nice for me, because Sergio, when he got excited, would go like that with his hands. I don't know, he'd be talking to you. So when I saw the bank in the movie, I went, I imitated his hands. That I liked. I don't know.
The thing I recall about Sergio was his sincerity. He was very sincere about everything. He was sincere about what he wanted to be done. He was sincere about the way he shot it. He was sincere, you know, like it was, and he had a sense of humor, you know, like, and he was sincere about the sense of humor, you know, like he had that, and that was one of the really nice things about him. He was really sincere, you know. When he gave you a hug, you knew that it was a hug and it was a sincere one. It wasn't just a brush arrow, you know.
1971年に夕日のギャングたちを完成させると、その後彼は10年以上も映画監督の仕事から遠ざかっていました。
Si è preso un periodo così lungo perché lui aveva letto un piccolo libro tascabile che si intitolava A mano armata e si era innamorato di questa storia e voleva farla.
しかしその間にレオーネはいくつかの映画をプロデュースし、若い監督を育てました。その作品の中にはミスター・ノーボディなどがあります。また映画は撮りませんでしたが、いくつかのテレビコマーシャルの監督をし、賞も取りました。その特徴ある音楽はやはりモリコーネが担当しました。
Mi divertiva vedere papà come lavorava, come era attento, che grandissimo professionista era sul set, cosa che poi ho potuto verificare di persona qualche anno più tardi, quando avevo 20 anni, un anno prima che lui morisse, girammo una pubblicità in Africa e io andai lì, diciamo, ero l'aiuto dell'aiuto dell'aiuto. Una grandissima energia, cioè proprio sprigionava una grandissima energia sul set, impressionante, era una stacanovista del lavoro. Questo per me, che l'ho sempre visto come padre, un po' pigro, un po' diciamo sempre a casa, sul suo lavoro, era un aspetto che non conoscevo e che mi sorprese.
Periodo lui a casa era come un orco, noi scappavamo, tant'è che scappavano i figli da tutte le parti perché sentivano sempre questa voce roboante che c'aveva da lamentarsi, no, da gridare per qualcosa. Insomma, era diventata una vita difficile e allora io gli ho proprio detto: guarda che tu stai cambiando carattere e non sei felice. Tu non puoi essere quello che sei e importi di fare una cosa che non ti riguarda.
ザ・フッズ映画化の権利をやっと獲得したレオネは早速脚本家たちに仕事を依頼しました。こうして「Once Upon a Time in America」の脚本制作が始まりました。
Noi siamo entrati in una fase insomma, abbastanza avanzata, però questo qui comunque ci abbiamo lavorato per 12 anni lo stesso, ecco. Insomma, è stata forse la sceneggiatura più lunga della storia del cinema.
During the script writing, he was shooting the film in his mind, you know, which made things much easier, you know, when, you know, the film was actually made and shot.
Walking up and down aimlessly on the Croisette in Cannes, I see on the terrace of the Carlton Hotel an unmistakable face. Oh my God, this is Sergio Leone. Now, I did not know at that time that he was sitting on that terrace for 11 years waiting for a guy to walk over, introduce himself, and say, "May I write a check and finance your movie and produce it?" So he was delighted. He said, "Sit down, have a coffee," and he told me the story frame by frame, literally on real time. I think it was 3 hours and 47 minutes, and I was seeing the movie. And I got up, I gave him a hug, and I said, "I'm in."
They sent me the Sergio's outline for the film. The outline is 200 plus pages, the outline for a film. That's twice as long as most films. Sent it to me, and I said, "Fine, I like it." And he proceeded to give me a script and talk to me. It was an Italian script, meaning the description is on the left and the dialogue's on the right. The script that he gave me had the description on the left and nothing on the right throughout this entire script. And he said, "Fill it in." Develop the characters and fill it in. So I proceeded to do so, and I wrote a draft. This is a script over 400 pages long. I wrote this draft. I brought it to Sergio in New York at that time, brought it to Sergio, and he sat down with it, and he began to read the script, and he read it, and he started to chuckle, and he started to laugh, and he was rocking and reading it and laughing, and he called one of his assistants over, and then he read it to him, and he translated it into Italian, what I'd written. Read the entire script while I was sitting there, 400, laughing. And he looked at it and he said, put it down on the side, and he said, this is very funny. I don't want funny." And I proceeded at that point to go on writing.
After you do the Dollars trilogy, you know, how can you ever top that? And then he managed to top it. Well, Once Upon a Time in America, and it's like, there's almost like, how far can you go?
All the people, all the crew, I think could feel that would be a great movie. I mean, that we're all making something special.
He was very powerful, very in charge. I mean, you knew that this man was in charge of this movie and in charge of every single detail that was going to happen. It was very intimidating at first. Nobody on the set spoke any English, including Sergio. And he knew every look that was going to be in this film before he even shot it. He knew every moment how it was going to play out before he shot it.
I remember very specifically him looking at a page in which Noodles, the Robert De Niro character, meets Tuesday Weld in a hospital. And he looked at it and he said, "I need 10 more words." And he pointed to a line, Tuesday Weld line. And I said, "Isn't it okay the way it is?" He said, "It's fine, I need 10 more words." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "She's going to walk from here to there, and I want her to talk all the way there." He already knew what the set was going to look like. He knew how far she would walk. He knew where the camera was going to be before a set had been built, before anything had been done. And he knew he needed 10 more words to get Tuesday Weld across the room.
He had the vision, knew exactly what he wanted. He would get it every time, and yet he wasn't against being shown something completely different that we might come up with as actors, you know. So he had the best of both worlds going from, as far as I'm concerned, you know, an extraordinary vision, the temperament and discipline and talent to bring it to fruition, and the kind of flexible ego that would allow input from people that would make things even better than he had imagined them if that were possible. And quite frankly, it very often was not possible to make it better than he envisioned.
He would demonstrate physically absolutely everything.
He was an actor. This man was an actor, and he could act Once Upon a Time in America from start to finish, 3 hours and 45 minutes, play all the different parts, and be convincing. That's how brilliant he was.
He even had explained and talked to Ennio Morricone about the music so much in advance that 2/3 of the music was recorded, not full orchestra, and playing on the set while we were shooting. It was like amazing. You go on the set and the music is playing already. It was magic.
Once we were doing a scene where Bobby gets out of prison and I'm supposed to meet him, and Sergio's on this big crane. We're down in the Bedford-Stuyvesant, or the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. We're on the street, and Sergio says, "Oh, it's going to rain." So he's sitting on the crane waiting because he was a big wide shot of the street, and as we come together, the crane comes down and comes right into the two of us, and Sergio wanted to start raining in the middle of the shot. So he was like trying to time the shot, you know, like, I mean, they couldn't get rain machines in because the shot was so wide to begin with. And I thought only Sergio Leone would wait for God, like, to have it start raining in the middle of the take, you know, and trust that when he said action, God would accommodate him by, you know, letting the clouds open up. And, you know, much to my, well, actually not surprised, but to my never-ending astonishment of working with Sergio Leone, you know, we did the take, and of course, in the middle of the take, it started raining. So there it was, you know. I said, you know, there it is.
How are you, Uncle? You're looking good. You're looking a little better. Come on. Let's get you off the streets.
Everyone has had a big consideration of him, but not only as a director, as a man. I love to think that he used to spend his nights, I mean, his dinner with everyone. It wasn't a star, never. So we spent nights cooking in the hotel where we were staying with the technical or De Niro or whatever. I mean, it was the same thing. People he loved, people he liked to stay with.
That film was made in, what, 1982? And this is 1999. And to this day, people come to me and say, "Can I ask you a question?" I go, "I don't know whether it was me who jumped in the garbage truck or not." And Sergio's answer was, "You know, it could be you, it could not be you." And in fact, for that actual shot, we used a photo double, even though I was on the set, because Sergio wanted it to be a little confusing whether it was me or not. And he said, it's like Jimmy Hoffa. We know, but we don't know, but we know, you know. And that's the case with my character. Was he thrown in the garbage truck? Was he shot? There's one thing we know. He ain't coming to dinner tomorrow night, okay? You know what I'm saying? He's not going to be showing up, you know, for the Red Sox game next Tuesday, you know, so it doesn't make any difference, you know, because in that world, you never know, and that's sort of the point. And, I mean, to make a movie that long that rests on that kind of puzzle and then leave the audience consciously so frustrated, and yet challenging them to admit that they know what the answer is, even if they think they don't know, is just astounding. I mean, the level of difficulty that he tried to achieve in that movie, that he aspired to, and did achieve, it's extraordinary. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. And forget that I'm in it. I mean, I wish I weren't in it so I could say it more fervently. I mean, it's just, it's an absolute masterwork of cinema. There's no doubt about it.
All'uscita della prima, al Barberini qui a Roma, la gente era piena e usciva non soddisfatta, gonfia di film, dopo 3 ore e 40 di immagini, di storie, di cose così, era proprio soddisfatta, ecco, come avesse mangiato un grande pranzo. Così. E Leone stava sul marciapiede opposto per vedere la faccia della gente, come usciva. E un signore lo riconobbe, ero lì io, venne questo signore e disse, signor Leone, complimenti, ho passato 2 ore e mezzo, fantastiche, così, eccetera. Ma mi vuole spiegare che cosa significa quel sorriso di De Niro alla fine, visto dall'alto, così? Che il film comincia in una fumeria d'oppio e lui fuma l'oppio all'inizio e poi finisce lì. Chi lo sa che tutto il film non sia una specie... Zitto, signor Leone, per favore, no, non me lo dica questa cosa. E se ne andò perché non voleva sentire che il film poteva essere un incubo, così, un sogno dovuto all'oppio. E lui gli ha dato questo significato dopo.
A few weeks before it came out, they decided to use the assistant editor of Police Academy or something, to chop it all up and tell it in linear fashion, which is the whole point of how the story is made, was that it's not in linear fashion. I mean, it was the telling of the story that made it such an extraordinary film. And I remember it was a huge disappointment to me and so on, and Sergio had been so great, and when we were at the Cannes Film Festival, where it had its world premiere, the reviews and the response was so astounding. I remember one article that said, headline said, filmmakers cast your films into the sea. Leone is here with Once Upon, it was like, because it was like that. I mean, it just got this 15-minute standing ovation, and then was butchered, and I thought it must have broken his heart.
Today, what I would have done, I would have opened it in a couple of theaters, started word of mouth going. I was really, truly naive. I did not know a lot of things.
There are 3 versions released in the United States that I know of, and then there's a much longer version, which is the definitive version that's never been shown in the United States. The first 2 versions, which were the initially released ones, which got very, very bad reviews, were not only shortened, but the time sequence was changed. The film is a series of flashbacks to 2 different periods, plus the present, which is 1968 in the film. And by going back and trying to arrange it chronologically, which is what happened when the film was released initially, it doesn't make any sense.
Imagine how horribly unorganized the release was, to a point that they forgot to enter Ennio Morricone's music to register. Or Ennio would have gotten Academy Award for sure. It's probably the best score in the history of the movie business, by far.
Sheila Benson at the time voted it the worst movie of the year, and then 8 years later voted it the best movie of the decade, which I thought was really interesting. The best movie being Sergio's own cut, the worst movie being, of course, the cut that the studio released.
The last time I saw Serge was in Paris, actually. We had lunch at, I don't know, someplace, and he was telling me about how they had ruined his Once Upon a Time in America. How they made him cut a lot out, they had to cut the time out, and really, and he was really sad about that. He said they spend a lot of time in making a nice movie, and they take all the essence out. And I said, well, you can put it back in, man. Put it back in.
There is another half hour we are planning to put back and come with a full director's version. This time I know what to do.
しかし厳しい撮影のスケジュールはレオーネの健康を蝕んでいきました。彼は重度の心臓病と診断されました。
Però sapevo anche che purtroppo l'unica alternativa era quella di fare un trapianto. E non so quanto questo lui lo sapeva, quindi avrebbe accettato questo.
第二次世界大戦下のレニングラードを題材にした映画を作りたいという思いはかなり以前からレオーネの頭の中にありました。Once Upon a Time in Americaを完成させたレオーネはすぐにこの大掛かりなプロジェクトに乗り出します。映画レニングラードはハリウッドとソビエト政府という前代未聞の共同制作によりいよいよ動き出そうとしていました。
Immagina un po' se un presidente americano di una compagnia di questo tipo puoi pensare che scelga di fare un film che gli viene raccontato. Renditi conto.
There wasn't a script, there wasn't a treatment, there wasn't nothing, just one scene. And on that, he was almost signing a movie that would cost almost $100 million.
We start, Christopher, with Shostakovich's hands. And the camera goes back from the hands through a net curtain, and we realize we're in a helicopter. And the helicopter goes to the left past this block of apartments, and next to it are all these people in Leningrad getting up at the beginning of a day to go to work and to go to the front. So here's a tram and some trucks, and the siege is on, so there's all these images of an inferno of a siege, cannibalism, corpses burning, people trying to dismember their pets, you know, dead relatives being pulled along in the snow, an absolute Dantean inferno of the siege. The camera goes to the left. This is one shot. The camera goes to the left. We've had the block of flats, we've had all this teeming life. The trams go round, they go to the edge of the city, where the people get off the trams, get into the trucks. The camera continues going left. The trucks go to the river. The camera goes across the river, where there's an entire panzer division of 200 tanks. The camera is still going to the left, one shot. And it goes right up to the panzer tank commander, to his two eyes through goggles. And the voice says, "Fire!" Camera goes blank. A Sergio Leone film. The only other thought he had was it was to be about an American newsreel reporter who falls in love with a Soviet girl, which is forbidden, and that the American would die at the end, only you wouldn't see him die. What you'd see is a piece of newsreel footage that he was shooting, and the camera would go up in the air, and the woman is in the cinema, and she sees that her boyfriend has died by the footage that he shot. That's a Leone moment. You understand the person's death through the movies.
The day after he died, 2 days after, he would have to leave to go to Los Angeles to sign the contract.
Abbiamo fatto un film da solo con Sergio, siamo arrivati tardi. Dovevamo farne un altro, che era l'assedio di Leningrado, e invece si doveva partire per farlo, e poi lui invece ha pensato bene di lasciarci.
Perché aveva trovato un piccolo terreno in un cimitero vicino al mare, qui vicino a Roma, e che era molto carino, così eccetera. Ah, mi sono innamorato di questa cosa qui e ho fatto fare dei disegni per la mia tomba, ed era come quella di Ramsete II, insomma era una specie di piramide, cosa enorme, fantastica così. E quindi sai, ho trovato proprio il posto più bello che si possa immaginare, perché poi è anche comodo. Insomma, da lì, in 20 minuti sei in Piazza del Popolo. E avevo capito che lui pensava che era comodo per lui, cioè che essendo lì, cioè, vabbè, in 20 minuti vado in Piazza del Popolo. Infatti ci guardò perché lui faceva una faccia un po', ma che cretini, diceva, no, dice, per chi viene, non per me.
I know that the doctors told him that he would have to have a quiet life, I mean, or more quiet, that he have to be careful, but couldn't do that. I mean, it was, saying my father stop making movie or change your mind would be killing him, so it would be the same. So I couldn't do that.
His concentration was so intense on what he was doing, and all his energy went into that project. As he said, I lose 5 years of my life on every picture, and I saw it happening. I mean, him putting an hour in is like most directors putting 4 hours in.
When I first started filmmaking, there was all these little filmmaking expressions I didn't know and everything, and so I would just kind of make up stuff, and that became the expression as far as the term was concerned on the set. And the biggest one was I always knew how to say an extreme close-up, but again, I always I'm thinking in terms of the effect I want, and so I'd say I want a Sergio Leone. Okay, so give me a Sergio Leone here, and then when I'm saying Sergio Leone, that's more important than saying an extreme close-up, because anybody can give you an extreme close-up. When I say give me a Sergio Leone, I'm implying the feel I want of it. It's just not an extreme close-up. It's not just a frame.
La sua maniera di porsi di fronte al film, di fronte alla maniera responsabile e creativa che lui ha fatto nel suo cinema. Io penso con grande rammarico quello che lui avrebbe potuto fare se fosse rimasto in vita. Non so fino a dove poteva arrivare il suo miglioramento. Questo è un grave rammarico per il cinema italiano e per il cinema mondiale.
You know, on my deathbed, you know, and somebody says, you know, what was the greatest artistic experience you ever had? It was working with Sergio Leone. There's no doubt about it. It was the Everest of my life, you know. And I never got a chance to tell him that because I was too young or confused or too shy to call him up and sort of say it, you know, and so on. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview is to sort of say it so somebody in the world could hear it.
I know a lot of people when they're interviewed will say something like, that was one of the most exciting periods of my life, the most exciting things I ever worked. What do you mean the most? That includes a lot of other things then too. No, that was the most exciting creative experience I've ever had.
Many times when I'm shooting a movie with a director, you know, he's putting the camera and I think of Sergio and I say, Sergio, unfortunately, it's not you here today.
I wish he was still around.